Under the dazzling spotlight of WWE, superstars are often admired as heroes, strong, charismatic, and always giving their all for the fans. But behind the scenes, not everyone maintains that perfect image. Some once celebrated names in the ring have been called out by their peers as bullies, figures who inspired fear rather than respect. Today, Wrestling Sphere takes a closer look at the famous wrestlers who have been accused of bullying, both inside the ring and behind the curtain. 1. JBL, the backstage nightmare of WWE. John Bradshaw Layfield, better known as JBL, wasn't just a standout character in the WWE ring with his arrogant swagger and hard-hitting style. He also earned a lasting reputation as one of the most notorious backstage bullies in wrestling history. And this wasn't just a media-fueled rumor, it stemmed from a series of disturbing accounts from those who had to work alongside him. JBL was often accused of using his seniority and influence within the company to pressure and dominate newer talent. With his intimidating presence, commanding tone, and aggressive personality, he reportedly pushed rookies into uncomfortable, even hostile situations. Several backstage witnesses claimed that JBL frequently resorted to verbal abuse, creating a toxic environment that left some newcomers feeling isolated and mentally worn down. One of the most well-known examples is The Miz. When Miz first arrived in WWE, he was kicked out of the locker room and forced to change clothes in the hallway, all because of an unwritten code enforced by JBL and other veterans. Another case involves the Blue Meanie, who claimed JBL legitimately attacked him during their segment at ECW's One Night Stand, allegedly as a form of retaliation. Former WWE ring announcer Justin Roberts also revealed in his memoir that JBL led a group of wrestlers who would regularly pull cruel pranks on him, some of which crossed way beyond the line of good fun. Many believe that JBL used his position as a WWE champion, and later as a commentator, to maintain power and control off-camera as well. While JBL has often denied or deflected these allegations, the persistent stories surrounding him have made it hard for fans and insiders alike to dismiss his locker room bully label as baseless gossip. 2. Ryback, the out-of-control destruction machine. Ryback was once portrayed by WWE as an unstoppable monster, an indestructible force with a brutally aggressive and unforgiving in-ring style. Every time he stepped into the ring, he resembled a human wrecking ball, tearing through opponents with raw power and intensity. But behind the chiseled physique and intimidating presence was a reputation that sparked countless complaints, not from the fans, but from his own peers backstage, far from the spotlight. Many who worked alongside Ryback have openly stated that he wasn't just stiff in the ring. He often showed little regard for the safety of his fellow performers. Several wrestlers reported being injured after matches with him, and not all of those injuries could be chalked up to bad luck. Some believed Ryback was too reckless, too impatient, or simply lacked respect for his opponent's limits and well-being. In a high-stakes environment like WWE, where trust between performers is crucial, that kind of behavior didn't just raise eyebrows, it earned him the label of a locker room bully. One of the most vocal critics of Ryback was none other than CM Punk, a major figure in WWE history. Punk publicly slammed Ryback, calling him a careless guy who doesn't even know how to control his own strength. He didn't hold back, revealing that every time he had a match with Ryback, he had to mentally prepare himself to get hurt. It wasn't wrestling for entertainment anymore. It became a source of frustration, knowing that stepping into the ring with Ryback could feel more like surviving an ambush than performing a choreographed fight. Ryback, however, didn't stay silent. He hit back with a series of controversial posts on social media, accusing WWE and several wrestlers of being hypocrites who used him as a scapegoat. He claimed that he was misunderstood and unfairly targeted by those trying to protect their own images. But no matter how passionately he defended himself, Ryback's image remained tainted in the eyes of many fans and industry insiders, a cautionary tale of how a superstar can fall from grace by losing the respect of the very community that once embraced him. 3. Bully Ray, when the ring name mirrors the man behind it. Bully Ray, one half of the legendary tag team, the Dudley Boys, made a name for himself with a brutally intense in-ring style and an aggressive persona. But over time, that persona raised questions. Was Bully just a character for the show, or a reflection of his real-life behavior behind the curtain? During his run in TNA/Impact Wrestling, Bully Ray fully embraced the role of a bully, loud, brash, and confrontational. But for many in the wrestling community, it wasn't just an act. Rumors swirled about his arrogant attitude toward younger talent, with claims that he often acted superior, rarely cooperated with newcomers, and sometimes used training sessions or rehearsals as opportunities to assert dominance. Given his years of experience, some felt he should have played the role of a mentor. Yet instead, he was seen as overly harsh, even discouraging to those trying to find their footing. And the controversy didn't stop backstage. Bully Ray also made headlines for questionable behavior toward fans. One particularly infamous incident involved him being accused of shouting offensive remarks at a fan during an independent wrestling show. While the promotion eventually issued a statement and handled the situation internally, the damage to Bully Ray's reputation was already done. Many criticized him for crossing the line between performance and personal conduct, especially since fans are the ones paying to support the product. Despite the controversy, Bully Ray's contributions to wrestling can't be denied. He was a key figure in the golden era of tag team wrestling and played vital roles in multiple major promotions. Still, the lingering perception of him as a real-life bully continues to cast a shadow over his legacy. A reminder that for some wrestlers, the line between character and reality isn't always so clear. 4. Hardcore Holly, a fierce warrior or a bully disguised as a mentor. Hardcore Holly, a name long associated with grit, aggression, and punishing physicality inside the WWE ring, has always been someone fellow wrestlers approached with caution. While his career never quite reached the legendary status of some of his peers, Holly stood out with his no-nonsense wrestling style and an intense backstage demeanor that many described as downright brutal. Over time, that reputation earned him a darker nickname among some in the locker room, a silent bully, someone who masked intimidation behind the guise of mentorship, often using his fists to send a message. Unlike the scripted drama broadcast on WWE television, the backstage world is a tough proving ground where younger wrestlers are expected to hustle, adapt, and earn respect. But for Hardcore Holly, training sometimes crossed the line into full-contact brutality. He was frequently accused of striking rookies with real, forceful blows during practice sessions, justifying it as testing their toughness, though many saw it as excessive and needlessly harsh. The most infamous incident tied to Holly's name happened during the reality show Tough Enough, where he served as a trainer for aspiring young talent. In one training session, he stepped into the ring with Matt Cappotelli, a promising contestant, and unexpectedly unleashed a series of stiff, real punches directly to Cappotelli's face, causing him to bleed on the spot. The moment stunned both the audience and the wrestling world. What was supposed to be a teaching session turned into a spectacle of violence. Fans and fellow wrestlers alike were outraged, accusing Holly of intentionally trying to intimidate and humiliate the rookie rather than mentor him. In the aftermath, Holly defended his actions, claiming he simply wanted to show Cappotelli the harsh realities of the wrestling business. But that explanation did little to calm the backlash. To many, there's a clear line between tough love and outright abuse, and Holly had clearly crossed it. In a professional setting, a mentor who relies on physical punishment to teach lessons is hard to justify, and Holly's actions became a lasting stain on his image. Despite his attempts to clarify his intentions, Hardcore Holly remains a controversial figure. Some still see him as a tough veteran who believed in old-school discipline. But for many others, he represents the dark side of wrestling culture, where respect is sometimes demanded through fear rather than earned through guidance. 5. Brock Lesnar, a beast, feared both in and out of the ring. Brock Lesnar, a name synonymous with dominance, brute strength, and an icy demeanor, stands as one of the most intimidating forces in WWE history. But his fearsome presence isn't limited to just the ring. Behind the scenes, Lesnar has long been rumored to carry the same bully aura that he unleashes during matches. Ironically, it's his silence that many say makes him all the more unnerving to work with. Lesnar isn't known for being approachable. He tends to keep his distance from most of the locker room, rarely engaging in small talk or building backstage friendships. This has led to an atmosphere where even seasoned veterans, let alone rookies, feel hesitant around him. He's reportedly strict about the so-called unwritten rules of the wrestling world, showing little tolerance for those who step out of line, disrespect veterans, or cause unnecessary disruption backstage. One of the most talked-about incidents involving Lesnar was his rumored confrontation with Chris Jericho. As the story goes, Jericho almost got into a real backstage fight with Lesnar after a match segment that was considered excessively violent. Though the tension was diffused before things escalated, the moment added fuel to the image of Brock as someone always on the edge, someone you don't want to push too far. Many backstage insiders have admitted that Lesnar's mere presence changes the energy in the room. One veteran put it bluntly, "He doesn't have to say a word. When he walks into the locker room, everyone straightens up." His cold stare and no-nonsense attitude are often enough to set the tone without a single confrontation. Still, there's no denying Brock Lesnar's impact and legendary status in the wrestling world. He's a once-in-a-generation athlete whose accomplishments speak for themselves. But for many behind the scenes, the Beast incarnate is just as intimidating off-camera as he is under the spotlight, a figure who commands respect, often through fear rather than words. 6. The Miz, from victim to reverse bully? The Miz was once seen as the embodiment of persistence in WWE. A man who didn't come from a prestigious wrestling lineage, wasn't trained at a famous school, and definitely wasn't welcomed with open arms when he first set foot in the company. Coming from a reality TV background and carrying a confident, some said arrogant persona, he quickly became a target for ridicule and hazing by veteran wrestlers. One of the most infamous stories from his early days was being kicked out of the locker room and forced to change clothes in the hallway, simply because he ate food in a shared space. It was a minor infraction, yet punished harshly, just because he hadn't yet earned a place in the backstage culture. But time changed everything. The Miz not only survived the harsh initiation period, he thrived. He climbed the ranks, captured the WWE Championship, and became one of the longest-tenured and most recognizable figures in the company. However, with that success came a shift in perception. As his status grew, some began to whisper that Miz himself had started to become what he once despised, a reverse bully. In other words, someone who now called out others for the same backstage etiquette violations that once made him a victim. He wasn't known for aggressive outbursts or abusing his position, but Miz reportedly developed a no-nonsense attitude when dealing with younger talent. If someone acted disrespectfully, lacked team spirit, or ignored the unspoken rules of WWE's backstage environment, Miz wasn't shy about speaking up or applying pressure. Some viewed this behavior as overbearing, an attempt to assert control or enforce a pecking order. But others defended him, arguing that it was simply his way of maintaining order and professionalism, especially coming from someone who had learned those lessons the hard way. Whether one sees him as overly assertive or simply disciplined, The Miz's transformation from a hazed outsider to a respected locker room enforcer is a fascinating chapter in WWE's ongoing conversation about power, culture, and what it really means to belong. His story adds a unique layer to the complex world of WWE backstage dynamics, where yesterday's victim can become today's gatekeeper. 7. Batista, a big personality with no shortage of controversy. Batista, former world champion, muscle-bound icon, and one of WWE's most dominant beasts of the 2000s, always captivated fans with his intense style, stoic demeanor, and larger-than-life presence. With his transition into Hollywood, he carried that superstar aura wherever he went. But behind the glitz and glamour, Batista was no stranger to backstage controversy, particularly when it came to his reputation for being difficult and, at times, a so-called soft bully. Rumors swirled during his peak that Batista often came across as arrogant, especially toward younger or unproven talent. He was said to have a big ego, little patience, and a short fuse when he felt he wasn't being given the respect he believed he deserved. According to some backstage accounts, if someone acted unprofessionally or failed to follow locker room etiquette, Batista didn't hesitate to make his displeasure known, sometimes in a blunt, even confrontational manner. Unlike others who were labeled as physically intimidating or openly aggressive, Batista's style was more psychological. Several newcomers at the time hinted that working with him came with an unspoken pressure, a constant unease about when you might get a cold stare or a sharp comment. As one wrestler put it, he wasn't the type to yell or threaten, but he made you feel like you were always on edge. Batista was also known to have clashed with a few major names backstage, often due to differences in work approach or unspoken locker room hierarchies. While most of these disputes never made it to the public eye, they added to his image as someone who wasn't exactly easy to deal with behind the scenes. That said, time has brought noticeable change. After stepping away from WWE and finding success in the film industry, Batista began to show a more mature and composed side. His interviews and public appearances reflected growth and a willingness to reflect on his past. Still, for many in the wrestling world, his early years of stardom are remembered as a period when Batista embodied the role of the hard-to-please top guy, someone who demanded respect and wasn't afraid to remind others who held the power backstage. 8. Shawn Michaels, WWE's former backstage ego on fire. Shawn Michaels, widely known as the Heartbreak Kid, was the face of WWE in the 1990s, capturing fans with his electrifying in-ring style and natural star power. But behind the dazzling spotlight stood a younger, more controversial version of Shawn, one that many of his peers privately referred to as a backstage bully in disguise. During the peak of his early career, Shawn was known for his massive ego and wasn't shy about flexing his influence behind the scenes whenever possible. He developed a reputation for being hot-headed, temperamental, and often the source of backstage tension. Many believed that Michaels, intoxicated by his own talent and stardom, lacked respect not just for management but for his fellow wrestlers. Rumors swirled about his tendency to manipulate match outcomes or angles to bury those he didn't see eye to eye with, or simply to keep the spotlight on himself. The most infamous example of his backstage power plays was his deeply personal and professional rivalry with Bret the Hitman Hart. Their clashes weren't limited to TV storylines. The tension between them ran deep off-screen as well. The feud escalated to the point where the WWE locker room was divided into two camps, each loyal to one man. The infamous Montreal Screwjob, though we won't dive into its specifics here, remains one of the most controversial moments in wrestling history and only added fuel to the fire surrounding Michaels' already polarizing backstage persona. However, time has a way of humbling even the most rebellious. After years of battling injuries and personal demons, Shawn eventually returned to WWE with a drastically different outlook. Gone was the arrogant showstopper of the 90s. In his place stood a mature, thoughtful mentor. He became an integral part of WWE's developmental system, taking on a leadership role at NXT and helping shape the next generation of superstars. Those who've worked with him in more recent years widely agree, Shawn changed. No longer the brash, self-centered figure of old, he's become a respected teacher, responsible, grounded, and genuinely inspiring. While his past remains colored by conflict and controversy, Shawn Michaels has proven that even someone once labeled a backstage bully can evolve into one of the most admired figures in WWE's inner circle. His journey is a powerful reminder that redemption is possible, and that growth often comes from facing the consequences of your own legacy. 9. The Undertaker, the no-nonsense backstage enforcer. The Undertaker, one of the most iconic legends in WWE history, wasn't just a supernatural force in the ring with his cold stare and undefeated aura. He was also a silent powerhouse behind the scenes. Unlike others who were often branded as bullies, Taker didn't go out of his way to intimidate anyone. Instead, he was widely known as the locker room enforcer, and he took that role seriously. Back when WWE operated under a strong locker room code, the unwritten rules and culture among wrestlers, The Undertaker was considered the unofficial judge and leader. He wasn't management, but his word carried weight. He represented the voice of the veterans and made sure backstage traditions and respect were upheld. He didn't need to shout or throw punches. His quiet authority and the respect he commanded were more than enough. One icy glare from Taker could send a clear message to anyone stepping out of line. Several rookies admitted they felt a certain pressure when working under the Undertaker's watchful eye. Small gestures, like greeting veterans properly, knowing your place in the pecking order, or not being overly familiar in your first interactions, were seen as unwritten laws. Anyone who broke those silent codes, whether intentionally or not, might find themselves on the receiving end of subtle warnings. Not through aggression, but through distance, a cold shoulder from Taker or his tight-knit crew, the BSK, Bone Street Crew, which included legends like Yokozuna, Rikishi, and The Godfather. While his way of maintaining order may have felt strict to some, there's no denying that The Undertaker's presence was key in preserving the backstage hierarchy and culture of respect in WWE for years. He didn't bully people, but he made sure everyone knew. Backstage is just as serious as the spotlight, and discipline and respect matter just as much when the cameras aren't rolling. Who do you think is the real bully on this list? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Wrestling Sphere so you won't miss any of WWE's shocking behind-the-scenes stories.